the action meeting here on the 19th of April in Bristol, Virginia. Great, before we get started, let me just make a couple comments about our hosts and the folks here that have taken great care of us. Tom and certainly your wife Donna, and really appreciate what y'all have done to make us feel welcome and have a great time, which we did both. Great food, great people, great area of the Commonwealth, and it just feels good to be here. So it's really nice, and I appreciate everything you did. Again, thank you. And of course, you had lots of help from our local staff who made us feel very welcome, and always great to be back. And again, we realize as board members what it takes to take this thing on the road. It's a lot of work by a lot of people. I always like to look back and see this big printer that Carol carries around in the backseat of her car. I'm like, wow.
Just in case.
So appreciate all the work that everybody does. It's important for us to be able to get out and see projects and places. Yeah, Scott, excuse me, Commissioner, board member Kasparitz told me last night that he is no longer thinking that only complicated projects get done in big places. We've got a very complicated, interesting project right here in Bristol, and he'd be 100% accurate. But it's great to get out and see the work that we're trying to do here at this board, and you know, see what it looks like on the ground and what the challenges are. So I really appreciate all that. Over the Pledge of Allegiance. You'll join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public comment? We have a public comment period. No one has signed up. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak? All right, hearing none, and we will move on to the approval of minutes. There were minutes from the March 28th special V-Trans session and March 29th. They were in your package, distributed previously. Are there any comments or questions or corrections? Approval. Second. Gates moves approval. Ms. Hines seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. First item on the agenda, Mr. Gregg, good morning. Action on abandonment, primary system of state highways, Old Route 42 in Augusta in the Stanton District.
Yes, sir. Old Route 42 was discontinued by the State Highway Commission on September the 5th, 1957, upon the realignment of Route 42 in Augusta County. This 0.14 of a mile abandonment is being requested by VDOT in order to use the related land for the operation of the SWOOP area headquarters. VDOT published the public notice in the News Leader publication on February the 2nd and the 16th, 2023. No request for a public hearing was received. The Augusta County Board of Supervisors support this abandonment and unanimously approved a related resolution on March the 8th, 2023. CTB approval is required for 33.2-209 primary abandonments. VDOT requests the abandonment on this section of roadway.
Is there any questions? Blair? Motion?
I move that we accept it.
Second. Blair moves and Mr. Kasparitz seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much, Mr. Gregg.
Sorry.
Number two, Mr. Gregg.
Well, thank you.
Action on highway renaming portion of U.S. Route 29 Lee Highway to Route 29 in Fairfax County located within the Northern Virginia District.
Yes, sir. Approval of the Commonwealth Transportation Board is sought for the renaming of a portion of U.S. Route 29 located within the boundaries of Fairfax County from Lee Highway to Route 29, as requested by the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. Board of Supervisors enacted a resolution on September the 13th, 2022, requesting that the CTB rename portion of Route 29 located within Fairfax County to Route 29. Code of Virginia 33.2-213 requires a majority of the CTB members to approve a resolution naming a highway or bridge as appropriate. VDOT is aware of some opposition to this proposal. VDOT recommends this request be approved.
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lawson.
Thank you. Had an opportunity to review the code and have a couple of questions. It does limit us and direct us and gives us the power to give suitable names to state highways, bridges, interchanges. It prescribes a very detailed and easy-to-follow process for naming after state officials, and in fact, we've got one in the next agenda. This one, I think, is certainly for this board member is new and different, and the code talks about several things that ought to happen in the case of namings for things other than for these state officials, and it talks about the board developing and approving guidelines governing the naming of bridges, interchanges, and so on. I'm not aware of those, and I didn't see those in the packet. I did ask some of the senior members of the board, and I was told that, well, this is what we do, but I'm not aware of, as the code directs, approved guidelines, and I'm aware of a lot of other guidelines that we're pretty good at approving and following, and would suggest that we ought to do that. We ought to come up with something like that for something that is different than naming, commemorative naming after state officials, because I think this is different. I have an issue with thinking of a number as a suitable name, as that term is defined in the code. I actually looked up private entities, which is the other term that's used in the code. It doesn't describe numbers, and I'm thinking this is something that ought to be thought of and thought about before we go forward.
Mr. Yates.
Secretary, if you remember, Carlos Brown and I were appointed by Commissioner Valentine to do this exact study. And we came to a consensus, and then the board came to the same consensus, that we would let the localities initiate these name changes. We were not to initiate on our own, and that we would go along with the guidelines that the localities came up with. So we have had this committee work done before. Sorry, I didn't talk to you last night about it. I didn't realize you were about this, but that committee was probably 3 or 4 years ago. That was the consensus, that we would follow the guidelines. In fact, it was first initiated by Amazon, I believe, and we made that change for Amazon. We've made a number of changes, but we only do it, we don't initiate as a board, the locality has to.
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Casperts.
I would just add to those comments that one of the decisions that we made is that they would be required to pay for the cost of the changes that they initiated. And I believe in the project before us for Route 29 that Fairfax County has agreed to cover the cost for this signage change as well.
That's correct.
Well, Mr. Secretary, if I could follow up on the
Mr.
one
Lawson.
point. Thank you. The cost, I don't know the number. I can only imagine the number of residences and businesses that are going to have their addresses changed. And when we talk about the cost, is the county going to take care of these issues? I've heard some things about marketing for businesses and helping with that transition, but I suffered through and avoided my local EMS folks wanting to change my address. And if I'd gone through that, I would have been in a whole lot of trouble in terms of all of my verification information, that delightful real ID that we get after spending several hours at DMV and the like. And I don't know if that's been contemplated by this move, and if the county is prepared. I don't know how you take that on for the individuals, because they're going to have to spend the time at DMV to fix all that.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes, Ms. Hines.
This is not the first road renaming that we've done in Northern Virginia. In fact, there have been quite a few. And this issue has come up. Fairfax did work with the folks along Route 1 when the name was changed to Richmond Highway. So they do have some experience with this. And it's my understanding from talking to their staff, and there is a staff member here from Fairfax, that they do intend to work through this with all the businesses and the various folks. I do remember from the renaming in Arlington that Mr. Yates referred to, that the post office said it would honor the old address for as long as people used it. So there was, the post office was not concerned about the renaming at all. So that's what I know, Mr. Lawson. Up in my neck of the woods, everybody understands that there's a transition period. The signs will not go up immediately. It will take time. And so there'll be a period of transition.
So, yeah, Mr. Dodson.
You finished?
Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, this morning is the first time we heard that VDOT has found there's opposition to this proposal. Everything previously, VDOT has stated under public comments reactions, there was no opposition. As most of us know, and all of us know, that surveys were sent out, and I think it's cumulatively, I believe it's 900 companies, businesses in both roads, being Lee Highway is around 14 miles, and Lee Jackson Highway, which is named, around 8.5 miles, around 550 residences. So my attitude is that, there's a survey that was never given to us. Yes, it's a locality decision, but we have a lot of authority, but we have respect for the constituents and the residences, and particularly the companies. I did hear that the survey was sent out to mostly, I believe, and there again, it could be incorrect, this information we got from informed individuals. It was sent out on a card, and obviously to go online to fill out the surveys. And what I've heard and what I've read, there again, I have not seen the survey, but the majority of the residents did not want the name changed. So whether it's 57% or 60% or whatever. So what happens is that, in a mood of pure transparency, I think that we need to just look at that survey, deal with the issue, defer the discussion until the May meeting, get more information, because once we make a decision here, we move on. And we all know, and all these representatives from Northern Virginia, this is not some rural highway in Caroline County that we changed a number of years ago. This is going to affect thousands of people. And what occurs is that we need as much information. The worst thing could happen, in my opinion, is that the survey surfaces in the press after we make a decision. And we still might go along and approve the change. But to have more information in front of us, then we make more informed. And they voted in September, the board did, and this is April, and that's been 7 months ago. So one more month, obviously it's not going to change anything in relation to, information they've already given us, if we have all the information in front of us. Thank you, Secretary.
Let me say a few things. I became aware of some of this discussion the last day or so. As I read the code, and I'm not an attorney, Mr. Lawson, but I've read it. As I read the code, it's unclear to me exactly what the legislature expects of us as it relates to this specific kind of situation. In the code, it does give us authority to deny or approve. It doesn't tell us on which basis to generally do that, except in some circumstances. And it talks about vulgarity and things that would be sort of obvious to you. It also directs us to develop guidelines if we're naming it after a private entity. So if it was Joe Schmo Corporation Lane, we would have to have, it directed us to have guidelines to use to determine whether we would do that or not. I don't see anything in the statute that directs us to use guidelines for these kinds of renamings. And so we're sort of in this betwixt and between, in my view, where we have authority obviously given to us for some reason. Not exactly sure what was in the minds of the legislature when they adopted it, but they gave it to us for a reason. And it, you know, I don't believe in rubber stamping, so there's some reason in there, I would hope, that they gave it to us as opposed to just let the county do it, right? My view has always been, well, let me say one other thing. I don't think that what a previous board decided, and as far as I know, it's not codified, and I don't mean that in state statute, I just mean it was sort of an agreement amongst us. We operated, but I could be wrong about that. But this board can do what this board wants to do. That's the way that it works. What I would be concerned about in general, forgetting the fact that this has political overtones and all sorts of overtones in terms of the names itself, what I would be concerned about as a state official is that we have roads that are state roads that aren't confusing. And so that if I use an example, because Fairfax City is inside Fairfax County, it was sort of an easy example to use. If a road went through Fairfax County into Fairfax City and then back into the county, and it jumped around on its names as you went down that road, I wouldn't think that would be very good, right? I don't care what the name is or what the number is. If it jumps around, it's confusing. So that would be a concern to me as a state highway official. Second concern I would have, but the code doesn't say anything about this, sort of goes to the effects to the citizens. So I'm, you know, Joe's Plumbing Shop on Lee Highway, and it, you know, I got a big sign that says Lee Highway, and I got all sorts of stuff on my website, and I got letterhead done, and I got all these other things done. And you change the name, and I got to go to a bunch of costs. Now, in the code, cost of the actual road signs is borne by the applicant, in this case, the county. But there's nothing in the code that requires them to reimburse businesses or anybody else that has expense because of the name change. Having said that, I understand that Fairfax County is entertaining a program that is not yet specific to us, as far as I know, as to what they're going to do to alleviate some of this cost, all or some of the cost. I don't know which one it is. The point is that we don't have any guidance in the statute to even get into that, but we don't have any guidance not to get into it either. No, so it's like, where are we here? Particularly important to me, and Commissioner and I had a discussion about this last night, is that we're very careful when we give you information and tell you whether there's opposition or whether there's not opposition. In fact, I don't think I would ever tell you there's not opposition, because I don't think I can know whether there is or there isn't. And I think everything has opposition. Yeah, there's probably nothing we could say in this room that somebody wouldn't disagree with or oppose. And so I hate to put that out, and we're reforming how we will speak to that in the future. So here we are, right? We've got some consternation. We've got some questions about our authority, what we should do. We've got some precedent and policy, or small p policy, that we followed in the past. And we've got VDOT, who said there's no opposition, and now there is. And it's, you know, if you read the stuff that I read last night, it's, you know, substantial. It's concerning. But again, what is our role as a board? So I think you have a couple options. One is you could do, as Mr. Lawson's asking, and defer it and get some of that, and let's work through how we should deal with these items. Or number two, we can vote on it today, up or down, and it will be what it will be. And I think that's sort of where we are. And that's how I frame it for myself. And it's a bit of a conundrum because it's just not clear. And maybe it would be the wisest thing, perhaps, to let it get clear if there's no harm done. But I'll leave that to y'all to make that determination.
Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Lawson.
Start off by saying you're not a lawyer, but I think you gave a very good lawyerly analysis. And the code gives us two options, I think. They talk about those private entity namings, and they talk about the state official namings. And private entity is actually a pretty broad definition. It can be nonprofit entities, business entities, persons, corporations, et cetera. The point of it is what it doesn't say. It's not a number. If we were here talking about naming, as they did, I-66 to the Will Rogers Freeway, that's okay. That's a name. And so what I would recommend, to the extent Mr. Dodson's made a motion to table, I would second that, and we ought to fall back and get some guidance, because it's pretty clear we can only do that which the code authorizes to do. Whether we feel it's right or good, or we have to stay in this lane. And I think we do need to, for all of the reasons you went over, but more simply what the code says we can do. And what I would suggest, if we voted to change and make a name, a number, a name, and try to ram it into the definitions in the code, I don't think that works legally.
Secretary, very good comments by our fellow board member. He had some nice comments, too. I learned in government, which some of us serve in elected office, if you rush things too fast, sometimes you have regrets. I mean, Route 50's got 8 different names, in parts of Northern Virginia. This is not an attempt to keep the name. This is an attempt to look after the individuals and the companies that reside on these 2 streets, and to get more information, and to have our VDOT lawyers to answer these questions. So again, I would move that we defer this discussion until either the May or June, whatever amount of time we can get the information together. Actually, y'all would decide. May's fine with me, and we get more information from us, and then take a vote. The road's been named that for many years, and we all know the political issues and the issues that face our Commonwealth in the last number of years. And those of us that have deep roots in Virginia understand all the controversies. And we have to work through it through being practical, being businesslike, because VDOT is here to serve commerce. And we want to be sure, and they're in Fairfax County, okay, but these 900 companies that have their businesses on this road are well compensated, hopefully, and we have less aggravation, we have more information. So I move that we defer it until the month of May.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Dodson and a second by Mr. Lawson.
Don't we have a motion outstanding right now that hasn't been moved on?
We have an action item. There's
Action,
no motion.
okay.
There's no motion yet. That's the first motion that I've heard.
Mr. Secretary.
Further discussion, Ms. Hines.
Thank you. I am a bit surprised, I guess that is how I will start, that we would second-guess the duly elected body, elected by the people in Fairfax, who have gone through a process, who have made a request of us to make a change. But in some ways, it's not a change. It's the removal of a name and a reversion to the route number. The Route 29 and Route 50 are ways that all of us refer to those roads across the whole Commonwealth. They have different names in different places. I think that will continue. One of the questions we considered back when Mr. Yates and Mr. Brown were having their committee was, should we, as the Commonwealth Transportation Board, just decide on these roads that run all the way through the Commonwealth from border to border on a particular name and be done with it? And in the end, we decided that that was not a good approach, and that the way to manage this was to work with the jurisdictions, allow the jurisdictions to bring us, based on their community processes and their duly elected votes, what they chose to name a particular road, what they asked us to endorse. So I think that everybody in the Commonwealth of Virginia, whether you've lived here for hundreds of years or you're you know, a relatively new transplant like me of 45 years, that there's an understanding that our Commonwealth has some particular challenges when it comes to names and the stories of how those names came to be. And I, speaking for the elected officials that I work with on a regular basis, nobody entered into these conversations with preconceived notions. They listened to their communities. They had big committees. They had lots of hearings. And it seems to me that, well, this is a very narrow thing, this naming thing, that this board is in fact reliant on the jurisdictions for all kinds of information and requests that feed into our work. And I think we have to be, in my view, pretty thoughtful about second guessing the work of the jurisdictions when it comes to the things over which we have authority. And I would just say that.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Anyone else?
Chairman,
Mr. Folks?
I guess I don't understand what deferring is, kicking it down, the can down the road another month's going to accomplish. I think, as Ms. Hines said, this was US 29 before it was Lee Highway. We're really going back to the original designation, seems to me. And secondly, back to Mr. Lawson, you know, I guess I would disagree that saying US Route 29 is a number rather than a name. It seems to me US Route 29 is a name. It just happens to have numerals in the name. So I think to me, that's a nuance.
Well, Mr. Secretary, my approach is to gather more information. Whether we decide to name 29 and Route 50 from Lee Highway to Lee Jackson is secondary. And the fact that I feel personally that the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County hid the survey, did not make it public, because what happens is that, and there again, the information I've got is from private citizens who are on that task force. Now, I know one of them real well. I grew up with him. His name was Blake Myers, 4 years in West Point, 25 years in the military, retired lieutenant colonel. Make a long story short, his parents went to school with my parents. So my thing is, these are good people. What I'm trying to get to is to put one more month. It's been this for 100 years. One more month is not going to break it. It's just getting more information, not to be obstructive, but just for these companies, and some of us run companies or have run companies, to know that this issue is coming. And what happens is that they might live in Fairfax County, but they live in the Commonwealth of Virginia too. And if you hide in the survey, what's to hide? We all know that true transparency in the democratic process as well. I'm not trusting any elected official. All of us are in temporary positions, okay, without the information that they had in relation to the survey. Survey tells us a lot. Now we can make a decision from that. What occurs is that we're all in positions, all this board of supervisors, we're in temporary positions. These will affect a lot of people in the future. And I am not trying to defend the names. It's construed like that, just the process in relation to the naming process. And 30 more days, if we decide to have it in May through a vote, it's not going to cause anybody any pain when we have more information. And we can have our legal, again, our legal team from VDOT to answer questions to Mr. Lawson.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Smoot?
I think for the reasons that have been cited, this needs a little more work. But as Mr. Yates stated earlier, this board did 3 or 4 years ago deal with the matter of namings. And while I frankly had to, as they say, rise above principle on a number of votes with this regard we have had in the last year or two, I think it is correct that we look to the governing body of the locality to determine what various roads, highways, whatever, are going to be named in those localities rather than imposing our own views on that. So I hope as we do this additional work, and I do think there's a little work that needs to be done, that we come back with an affirmation, not just on what we're going to do with this one, but the whole notion that we're going to look to the governing body of counties and cities for their position on naming particular roads or highways, whatever they may be, and that we generally would go along with that. There may occasionally be a reason we wouldn't, but in general, I think that's where we need to look for direction on this naming issue.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot. Let me just say one thing, and we can, if there's new folks that want to talk or new information you want to say, then so be it. But we're not going to sit here and argue about this ad infinitum. Let me say one thing. The thing that troubles me as the secretary is preponderantly or mostly that we told you that there was no opposition. I don't like the fact that we did that because there is opposition. And as I said, probably on any matter that we could ever decide, there's probably somebody that would oppose it. I don't like that. I don't like that we did that. And then yesterday, all this, discussion comes out because there is opposition. I don't like that. So that's on us, and we won't do that again. But it's up to y'all to decide how you want to proceed. There is a motion, there's a second, and I'm going to let Mr. Kasparitz say what he needs to say.
Well, I
And
guess,
if there's
Mr.
nothing-
Secretary,
If there's nothing more from folks, if it's just going to be the same thing, then we need to go ahead and let y'all decide.
I would ask if we do turn down this request, what action we take as a board to work this out? What would our next steps be in this process to make a determination on what is appropriate? To Ms. Hines' point, the locally elected officials dealt with this issue. Whatever process they took to work through the opposing viewpoints, they are the locally elected officials. So I'm not sure what we as a board can do to modify that process, to make alternative suggestions, or to stand in the way of their decision. I just don't understand what our next steps would be.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, sir, Mr. Lawson.
Just a point of clarification, I think the purpose of the table is to get some direction from legal and also to fill up the record with accurate information about the opposing view. One other thing I'd like to try to make some sense of, Mr. Kasparitz, is it says no highway, bridge, interchange, or other transportation facility previously named by this board or the General Assembly shall be eligible for renaming by a private entity. And remember, private entities, that other option, state official or private entity. We got two choices. Unless such naming incorporates the previous name. So what I'm looking for is some direction, and I don't want to be this board's lawyer. It's somebody that will speak to the board and say, this is what the code says, this is what you all can do. And I'm very clear on what you're saying, which is the resolution shall come from the governing body. So Fairfax County did the right thing. They made a resolution. Now we need to do the right thing and process it within the parameters of the code.
So if the
That's
bo-
what I'm asking.
So if the board so decides, Mr. Kasparitz, to, and frankly, I'm going to do it regardless, because this will come again. We're going to get more clarity around what the law is, what the direction is, what we should feel is our latitude, and we'll go back through some of the same ground, Ms. Hines and Mr. Yates, that we referenced before, but it's a different board. But that's what I would intend to do, is to come back to you with both the Attorney General's view of the statute and what it allows and doesn't allow us to do, because it's clear that we decide. It's clear. It says, we decide. It doesn't say we decide and we follow this or follow that. It says we decide. Now, what should we do may be a whole different issue, is our policy. But, so if y'all decide to table this, and I would hope that we would be inclusive of 2 and 3 if they're on the same place, so we don't have to go through the debate again. So, Mr.
Might have to delay
Lawson,
the aircraft.
Mr. Dodson, if you want to amend your motion
Yes, sir.
to
Okay.
include 2 and 3 for the sake of
I
efficiency,
accept
I'll
that
second
amendment.
that as
I
well.
second that as well.
then if that's what I will do regardless, but that's what, so if the board tables it or defers it, we're coming back with that information, and if the board votes for it, we're coming back with that information. So that's the information that will be new to you, hopefully will help us all, and maybe this board can coalesce around some policy as we are allowed to or not, as we find we're allowed to under the statute. That would be what I would do, if you all decide to table.
The motion
Secretary.
includes May, is for May.
The motion is open to amendment if you want to do it another month.
Why don't you just make it May?
Okay.
May is May. Next meeting. Yes, Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
You haven't had a chance yet.
That's quite right.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. No,
Welcome
will
to the
not
party.
I will not repeat what's been stated, but as part of the due diligence between now and May, will we request of the Board of Supervisors the results of that survey?
Certainly
I
can.
found it particularly concerning that what we received, the 60% of the respondents said they were not in favor of it, and that was not anywhere in our material. So,
Lot to unpack. Yes, Ms. Sellers.
I'll be supporting the motion, but, because I don't see a problem in deferring. When we talk about locally elected officials, it is the hardest thing to name things, right? That is a very controversial topic in board chambers, and in this, something that I think we all need to think about is that while the Board of Supervisors may have made a decision, we will also be going on record making a decision. We need to understand what we're talking about, because whether we like it or not, in this particular case, we will be thrusted into that national debate. And so deferring it, in my opinion, for 1 month would not hurt that, and it would give us some time and some clarity to make sure we know what we're doing as we go in.
Anyone else?
Secretary, I will say, nice comments. I served on the city council for 12 years, and we were the first city council that named a road Martin Luther King Boulevard, or overlay. And I can tell from personal experience, that was years ago, but that was something that we had to think through. And we had to be calm, because whatever decision we made as a city council, of course, in the cities, we can name roads without the Transportation Board approval. But we just want, if we take, again, I want to be repetitive, but if we take a little more time to make the decision with more information, I think it's the best course. So I'll call the question.
All right, I think we've had enough. Anybody else feel compelled? We have a motion and we have a second, and I'll restate the motions to make sure we have clarity. The motion is to defer items number 2 and 3 to the May meeting for consideration then. And in the meantime, I will come back, regardless of your vote, I will come back to you at that meeting with some additional information on the statute and sort of how we see our authority and what our practice has been and sort of what we did from years ago that Mr. Yates and Ms. Hines have referenced. Bring you some more information. We'll get some more information from Fairfax, and we'll come back here in May to that's a long motion, but I hope you can boil it down as succinctly, but that's what we would do.
Mr. Secretary, appreciate that. I would just ask that whatever information our board gets and whatever time our board gets that it also be shared with Fairfax. That we not just ask them
Sure.
for information, we share.
Sure. All public information. We should share with anybody that wants it or desires it. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No.
Ayes have it. We'll defer until May. We'll come back at that time. Mr. Gregg. Item number 4, action on commemorative naming of the bridge of State Route 163, South Amherst Highway over U.S. Route 29 Business in Madison Heights as the Earl Nicholson Bridge located within the Lynchburg District. Mr. Gregg.
Amherst County Board of Supervisors enacted a resolution in February of '23 to honor Earl Nicholson's life and service to his community. Mr. Nicholson was known throughout Amherst County as a friend to all those who crossed his path. He was well known by multiple organizations within the Madison Heights community, including but not limited to Madison Heights Youth Baseball Association and the American Legion. The Department of Transportation recommends this request be approved.
Let's give Mr. Nicholson our attention. This is a commemorative naming over on U.S. Route 29 in the Lynchburg District. Mr. Dotson.
Yes, I so moved the resolution. I heard he's a great guy, and since I was a very bad baseball player when I was a kid, and him being in Madison Heights Youth Baseball, he was a big guy, so I moved the resolution.
For a second.
Second.
So Mr. Dotson moves and Mr. Merrill seconds. Please join me in rising and support if you do so. Thank you very much. Pryor, good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
How are you
Secretary.
today?
I am well, thank you.
Let's talk infrastructure investment.
Yes, sir. I have 2 action items for the board this morning. The first is my monthly transfers, and I recommend your approval.
Transfers have been provided to you in advance. Are there any comments or questions? Have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Dr. Smoot moves, Mr. Casper seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? All right, item number 6.
The second item is the amendment of several projects to the 6-year improvement program. Most of these projects are new pipeline studies. Your district staff should have coordinated with you to identify these studies that we will be beginning as soon as you approve them. I recommend your approval.
Approve.
Mr. Merrill moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Ms. Pryor.
Thank you.
Well done. Ms. Farmer, we're going to do some financial planning.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Today I bring to you a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds for the Route 58 program. I workshopped this item last month with the resolution, which relates to bonds with principal not to exceed $250. We're sizing it just shy of that. The resolution also includes our current preliminary official statement, our supplemental trust agreement, the continuing disclosure, as well as the notice of sale. Our financial advisor ran numbers last night after the markets closed, and with current conditions, all in cost of 3.81 at the current time, and that holds till.
Was that in line with our projection, our expectation?
It's close to what we had a few weeks ago when I came before you.
Any questions?
Just a question.
Mr. Stamp?
What's the source of repayment? General obligations of the company?
No.
Yes, sir. Mr. Stant, the Commonwealth Transportation Fund has an off-the-top commitment to the Route 58 program of $40 million. There's also codified requirement that VDOT transfers $20 million from the construction fund. So each year it receives $60 million for the debt service.
We're not in the GO business. All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Second.
Folks moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? All right, ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Secretary?
Yes, sir.
I'd like
Mr.
to
Merrill.
I'd like to commend Ms. Farmer
Farmer?
for her work on this. I mean, this is very complicated. Get an all-in rate in this interest environment, 3.81 is commendable, so thank you for your efforts.
Sir.
We were really hoping for 3.2 8-0, but close.
Less than 5 by June.
Call the guy back up and tell him no. 3-8-0. Thanks so much. Mr. Russ Dudley, item number 8, action on economic development access to Falling Branch Corporate Park in Montgomery County in the Salem District.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board.
Morning, sir. Welcome.
At the March workshop, the board was provided an overview of an economic development access allocation request for Montgomery County. And today, we have the resolution for your consideration. Montgomery County is requesting the maximum program allocation of $850,000 to support the extension of Parkway Drive at the Falling Branch Corporate Park. The estimate for the project is just over $2 million, and the county will administer the project. Falling Branch Corporate Park has a Tier 4 status from the Virginia Business Ready Sites Program, which means it is prepared and positioned for selection of economic development projects and has a high potential for attracting businesses. VDOT supports this request for the allocations and recommends board approval.
Dr. Smoot,
Mr. Secretary, members of the board, I move approval.
for a second.
Second.
Ms. Sellers seconds. Dr. Smoot makes the motion. Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Sir. Mr. Bart Thrasher, Chief Engineer, my favorite Chief Engineer extraordinaire.
I'm the only chief engineer, sir. That doesn't help me out very much.
There are some in other states, sir.
That's a true statement, sir.
49.
Better than 49 others. I appreciate that very much. We have 2 bids.
Some of them called me and wanted to come to work here, too. I said, absolutely not. We got the best chief engineer.
Yeah. Sir, I appreciate that greatly.
You may want to not dig with me, because I dig faster.
I think this is a green bid.
Okay, sir, I have 2 bids to bring before the CTB this morning, sir.
Below range.
They are below range. The first is in Culpeper District. We had 3 bidders. The low bid was approximately $20.8 million. Curtis Contracting was the recipient. Bids represent good value, and we recommend approval.
Recommend approval.
Mr. Yates moves. Is there a second? Mr. Merrill seconds. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Next.
Second bid, sir, is in Richmond District. It's the File Line Trail northern section. We had 3 bids. The low bid was approximately $11.1 million. It was below range. Contractors Branch Civil. We find good value and we recommend approval.
Motion to approve? Sellers moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Lawson seconds. Forcefully.
Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary,
Ms. Hines.
I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
This one, there's a bigger range in the bids that you got. And when I'm looking at the previous one, Mr. Thrasher, we saw the price and then we also saw a combined score. So the combined score was considerably higher than the others. We don't have a combined score here. And because there's such a big range in the price, it makes me a little more nervous. So I'm just hoping you can speak to that, why this is so much lower than the others.
Secretary, Ms. Hines, I do not have the combined scores in front of me, but I can surely get those for you. You take a look at that. We did have 3 bidders, and the separation on the amounts was about $8 million between them.
Yeah, on an $11 million project,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
a big range.
So it is a 2-phase, like, as you said, it is a 2-phase best value, so I'll be more than glad to get that for you.
Yeah, it just makes me nervous.
Would that normally be included? Why would it be included on one and not the other?
Sir, I can't answer that. I don't have either one on my sheet, so I can't.
Yeah, we
I will
have it,
certainly
we
find
have it
out.
on the project R201 or whatever it is, the hydraulic road project.
If we have it on one, we should have it on both.
That's what I would think.
I think it's reassuring, actually, to be able to see the best value, especially when there's this much range in the price.
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Make that happen quickly.
All right, I think we had a motion and a second. We did have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you. Next. That's you. You're finished. Wait, good job, all in the green. Gotta love the green. Is there any new business to come before the board? Commissioner, Director? So let me again thank all y'all for participating. I know it's, it's tough to find time in our schedules to travel, but it's really important. And it's been great to be with everybody down in a great part of the Commonwealth. And hopefully we'll get back here soon and look at the
Puzzle.
the bridge over the bridge over the river, the street over the river. We need to find a catchy phrase for it.
Secretary, I will say that for the members who are flying, you should have a nice flight day.
Thank you so much. We intend to. And so with that, again, my thanks to everybody for making this such a great trip, and everybody have a safe journey home. And we will see you in May. I will say that yes, Dr. Smoot.
Carol, if you would give us some advice, you said something about leaving our iPads behind.
Yes, everybody should leave their iPads and the cords behind this meeting. iPads to you before so just leave them in, and our IT staff will take them back.
You want the cords too?
Yes. Thank you.
As we talked about yesterday, the commissioner and I will have the honor, along with some other folks today, to be at Afton Mountain to honor those folks who have lost their lives in Virginia in work zones. And so we'll be up there. I've got my orange tie. I'm not sure yours is UVA orange or what it is, but mine's Maury High School orange. I've got my orange tie on, and it
Could be Tennessee orange too.
I could be UT orange.
Uh-oh, down here you would be.
That's UVA orange.
It's UVA orange. Depends on what state I'm in, right? So I'm really looking forward to that in the sense of being able to honor those folks and represent you all there. So we'll do that this afternoon, later on this afternoon, going to Richmond. Yes, sir, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just had a question because I think there's been discussion about work zone safety and installation of cameras or whatever technology to issue tickets for any people. Isn't this a good time to even talk about that, when we can expect that, or if that's still moving forward?
There's some legislation. Go ahead, Steve.
Mr. Coleman, we're working in partnership with the Virginia State Police on the procurement of automated speed enforcement devices. That procurement is underway at this point in time, and we're hoping to have, I'm looking in the background, should have bids in sometime this spring, and then we'll go through with our IT professionals, the VITA, to be able to secure that contract and hope to have that starting to be deployed this fall.
Great news. Great timing.
All right. Thank you all very much. This meeting's adjourned.